We leave it now to take you live to Capitol Hill, where FreedomWorks is hosting a rally urging Congress to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
Well, I think the wind chill's clocking in at about 13 degrees, so I appreciate everyone for being here. So I just wanted to start. I saw there's a Vietnam vet. Is there any other vets here? Are there any other first responders, police, fire here? Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to jump up very quickly here. We've got Senator Rand Paul who's going to follow me. Was anyone here in 2009 when we had the first event, First March? All right. Gee, I think to remember the topic back then was repealing and replacing Obamacare, right? I mean, that was just stopping it then. So, look, now we got to finish it. Like, I'm a big football fan. We're like at the 5-yard line. The game's not over. We got to score, and this is our time to repeal Obamacare. But it is not going to happen unless you guys are doing what you're doing today and you're going and telling them in person. So over there is where Mitch McConnell works. When Mitch McConnell was running for re-election, his campaign theme was, we're going to tear up Obamacare root and branch, root and branch. So I'm looking at this crowd right now, and I believe we're here to help him keep his campaign promise. So please, folks, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your hard work. But please remember, Obamacare is not going to go down unless you guys help put it across the finish line. So with that, we're going to be bringing up, Andrew, you're going to be introducing?
That's the job, right?
All right.
That's what you brought me here for.
So thanks very much for coming and braving these temperatures.
I've been doing events with FreedomWorks for about 6 years, and one of the heroes of this movement has been a man who holds conservative, libertarian principles, and actually, unlike some of these guys that are just waiting to be told by Paul Ryan what to do, he actually came up with his own plan. So without further ado, Senator Rand Paul.
Hey, guys. You know what they're saying? You know what they're telling us? They're telling us that you campaigned for Obamacare Light and that you want partial repeal. They're telling us that you want to keep some of the Obamacare taxes. They're telling us that they're telling us that you want to keep the Obamacare subsidies. They're telling us that you want to keep the individual mandate. But it's worse. It's worse. They're telling you that instead of paying the government the mandate, they want you to pay a penalty if you lose your job or lose your insurance. They want you to pay a penalty to $1 billion insurance company. This bill is riddled from top to bottom with problems. Basically, they admit that they're not going to fix the problem of rising insurance premiums, and that when the premiums continue to rise, the government will continue to pay you money to pay the insurance company money. This is not about you. It's about reimbursing $1 billion insurance industry. So, there is a way that we completely change the equation. Right now, if each of you want to go and buy insurance and you're in a small business, when you get to the insurance company, what's the first thing they tell you to do? Kiss my boots. They tell you take it or leave it. But you know how we give you the power? We give you the power to join a group where you can get your insurance through a large buying group. How many people are in the NRA? All right, there's probably 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 million people in the NRA. What if we let you buy your insurance through the NRA? What if you had the head of the NRA call up the insurance company? You know what's going to happen? Instead of us kissing the boots of the insurance industry, they're going to bow down, get on one knee, and they're going to give us what we want. Good prices. When you get sick, you get kicked off. That only happens if you buy insurance as an individual. Let's let everybody join a group. We'll get lower prices. But you know what? It won't be a government mandate. It would be the marketplace working. It would be all of us joining together, and we would have the power to do this. The problem is this, though. The leadership in the House is weak-kneed, and they are afraid to lead with freedom and capitalism, so they're giving you something that's half as much as Obamacare but doesn't fix the problems. What we have to do is, the Freedom Caucus over there is 40 of the best conservative members. You're going to hear from some of them. You need to tell them you want them to stand firm. You want to bring down the Paul Ryan plan. And that what we want is freedom. We want to be free of Obamacare completely. The battle is just beginning. This is the very beginning of the battle, not the end of the battle. But I promise you, they will not negotiate until they discover they don't have the votes. When they discover they don't have our votes, but more importantly, they need to discover they do not have your votes. So when you go home, activate your email network, call your neighbors, tell them to call any of the weak-kneed Republicans that every damn one of us got out there and worked for, that we were not campaigning for Obamacare Light. We don't want any of it. Thank you for everything you do. I will never forget that the first campaign rally that I ever went to was a Tea Party rally in my little town in Kentucky, and 800 people showed up. You have the power, but you have to be more vocal. They've forgotten how they got here. We won the House. We're in charge in the House because of you. They need to not forget that it was the Tea Party that put them in power. We don't want anything to do with Obamacare subsidies, taxes, mandates. We don't want to bail out the insurance companies. We want freedom to get lower prices and to buy the insurance we want for our families. I'll keep fighting. Hang in there.
Senator Rand Paul. You know what's funny about the Tea Party? I was there in 2009. The Tea Party was born on kitchen tables across the country. And not that I would, but if I had worked for Hillary Clinton, I would have been in the fetal position on the ground when Bill Clinton said, Obamacare is the craziest thing. I mean, you got all these people that make too much to be subsidized, not enough to afford it. He was right. He was absolutely right that what the government had done was make something unaffordable to people who were affording it. The people who do their checkbooks at the kitchen table, who run their small businesses at the kitchen table. Well, Tea Party Patriots is a kitchen table Tea Party organization. So let me bring up co-founder and president Jenny Beth Martin.
Thank you so much for being here. It is so cold today. I'm from Atlanta, and this is cold. Guys, 7 years ago next week that we stood on that lawn and then on the other side, and we told them not to pass Obamacare. How many of you were here that weekend? When we found out that Congressman Stupak was caving, not that we were completely surprised, but when we found out, it was Sunday afternoon, and I told those of you who were left on the other side of the Capitol that we would repeal this law. I didn't know how. I just knew we were determined and we were going to do it. And it's funny, I didn't say we were going to repair it. We never wanted the government to take over our health care. We want health care freedom. That's what we stood for then. That's what we stood for in 2010, in 2012, in 2014, in 2016, and again here today. When we helped, and our values helped, Congress on the House side get the majority, they came back and told us, well, we can't repeal Obamacare because we only have 1/3 of the government. So we rolled up our sleeves and we got back to work. And in 2012, Obamacare and the repeal of Obamacare was not a centerpiece of the campaign for the presidential candidate, and we didn't have the results that we had later and in 2010. But in 2014, we helped again with our values deliver the Senate with the intention to repeal Obamacare. And then they said, well, we only have 1/3 of the government, so we still can't repeal Obamacare. Now we help them get President Trump in the White House. He's a man who made campaign promises, and he's a man who's working to keep campaign promises. And somehow now Congress on both the House and the Senate side are telling us that an unelected, paid Senate staffer, the Senate parliamentarian, can determine what goes in the reconciliation bill. And now they're saying, well, we may not be able to repeal it all because we don't control the parliamentarian. Except we have learned that's not correct. First, reconciliation, which requires only 51 votes to pass in the Senate, has to do with the things that go in it must do with the federal budget. I would contend that anything that has to do with insurance company mandates, which are driving the cost of insurance up around the country and will continue to do so, will have to do with the federal budget, especially if you're giving out tax credits to pay for those insurance premiums. They need to repeal that. They need to repeal Obamacare. It affects the budget. They need to fight for it. They need to explain why it affects the budget. And they need to remember that they're fighting for the forgotten man and woman in this country who has been left behind time after time by Washington, D.C. That's why we're here today. 7.5 years ago, I was with Adam Brandon as we were on the front lawn in September of the Capitol. C.L. Bryant just mentioned how we said that day, and I led the chants that day to say, can you hear us now? They made fun of us, they mocked us, they maligned us, they did everything they could to destroy us, they sicked the IRS on us, and we're still standing. We have someone who's willing to fight for our values, who isn't afraid to fight for our values in the White House. We need to help him keep his promises, and we need to make sure that Congress keeps theirs. Today, they want to copy us and imitate us because we are successful and we've made a difference. And today, we can't stop. we must continue. We must continue to make our voices heard. Apparently, the leadership in both the House and the Senate has not quite heard us yet. Apparently, they did not get the message in November when Donald Trump became President Trump against all odds. We're making a difference. We're going to continue. Go in these buildings, talk to your congressman, talk to your senator, remind them we expect them to repeal Obamacare. We want to help them replace it with a framework that's based on free markets that will lower the cost of health insurance premiums and not cause them to continue to skyrocket. While you're at it, the Senate Republicans, now look, our philosophy at Tea Party Patriots is stand with people when they do the right thing, hold them accountable when they don't. There is something that we can thank and hold the Senate Republicans, we can thank them for and encourage them. They helped last year keep the Supreme Court seat open until the election. The American people spoke. Thank them for that. Tell them to confirm Neil Gorsuch. We have postcards and petitions back there about Gorsuch to the right. As you look at the cameras back there to the right, if you want to pick any of those up to deliver. And if you will, if you're able to, I know it's very cold, but if you're able to text full repeal to 388873. 388873. I'll make sure FreedomWorks gets your names and numbers. You'll get a reply and you can enter your email address. I'll make sure they know who is out here today. And we appreciate everything you're doing. We're going to make sure that Congress keeps their promises. Thank you so much for making your voices heard for the last 8 years. I'm so proud of you and so thankful for you. Congress, keep your promises. Keep your promises. Keep your promises. Keep your promises. Thank you so much.
Jenny Beth Martin. Now, Ted Cruz is on his way. And again, we are broadcasting live on Sirius XM satellite radio, Patriot channel, channel 125. One small thing that I thought would be a good idea before we bring up Ted Cruz, because he's on the way. You see how Rand is moving. We rarely ever ask doctors what they think of Obamacare. Do they think they are functions of government, functions of the establishment of either parties? I would say most of them say no. Now, FreedomWorks actually has its own doctor. You want to hear from a doctor? Dr. Chad Mathis, please come up and tell everyone what it's like to be a doctor with Obamacare.
Well, hello. Hey, I got a quick question. Was it any one of y'all that forgot to tell the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker that we won? No? Okay. Well, I like I said, or like he said, I'm a doctor, and like so many of my fellow doctors, we like taking care of patients, and we like taking care of our families. But back in 2007, we put our heads up and realized that something was going on in Washington. Cash for clunkers, bailouts. It was terrible. So we rolled up our sleeves, all of you did, and got to work and elected Republicans and won on the House. And then we won on the Senate. And now we elected Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. It is time for leadership. And while I do agree with the Speaker of the House that it is a three-pronged approach with reconciliation repeal, rolling back regulations through HHS, and new health care legislation like Rand Paul's legislation. Well, in the House, they've had a lot of practice on the first step, and practice makes perfect. Almost 60 times they've tried to pass some form of repeal. Yes. But in 2015, they got it all the way through the Senate and got it to the president's desk, and he vetoed it. Well, they're not going to send it again because why? They're afraid of the parliamentarian. Ooh. I think they're more afraid of the parliamentarian than they were of President Obama. Look, this swamp needs draining. The muck and mire of this place with special interest and bloated bureaucracies has got us legislation that talks about individual mandates that are now insurance mandates. We're continuing Medicaid subsidies and taxpayer-funded subsidies to individuals. And these are new entitlements. This is crazy. We need real leadership. So listen, the fundamentals of seeing a patient haven't changed. We still see the patient, take a history, do a physical exam, diagnostic testing, and come up with a plan. But the more government is involved, the more expensive it gets. The more expensive it gets, more of your hard-earned dollars don't go to the things that you want. And that keeps our economy from growing. And it hurts the people the most that our president wants to help, the working families of America. So, go talk to your legislators. Tell them it's time to lead. It is time for bold action. Ask them to repeal and replace Obamacare with patient-centered forms. Thank you so much. God bless.
Oh, look, we've got some special snowflakes. I'm actually surprised there are no counter-protesters, but then again, it's cold out here, and you know. How many of you have heard of the Freedom Caucus? A couple of my friends in the Freedom Caucus stopped by. How many of you have actually read some of these CBO reports? They're pretty boring, right? But they're all based on a huge amount of speculation and theory. This Rube Goldberg effect that if this happens and that'll happen and all the dominoes go down, this is what something will cost. On the air the other day, we read aloud the revised 2014 CBO scoring of Obamacare, and it didn't save $1.5 trillion. It spent $1.5 trillion over 10 years. Not Medicaid, not Medicare, not other welfare programs. The subsidies alone, according to the CBO, spent $1.5 trillion. This is our last opportunity to stop establishment care, or what I like to call trans-Republican care. The Freedom Caucus is the group that can stop this bill. Please welcome my friend, Representative Mark Meadows.
Well, hello, deplorables. It is so good to see you. Boy, I tell you, I've even got a Meadows for Congress sign way back there in the back. You know, I thank you guys for coming out. I know the cold weather, you know, it's either extremely hot or extremely cold when you get here. But thank you guys, and for all of you guys that came from North Carolina. Oh, I tell you what, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We are standing in the fight with you. And this is about you. It's not about any member of Congress or any senator. It's really about the American people and all of you fighting for what is true, what is right, and truly for freedom. And so thank you so much. You know, there's a whole lot that is to be said about the forgotten man or the forgotten woman. And the Freedom Caucus is here to make sure that those forgotten men and women, the forgotten factory workers, the forgotten construction workers, the forgotten teachers, that we are here to stand with them to make sure that we take back this country for the Constitution, for our God, and for our freedom. And I thank you so much for being here. And I'm here to tell you that your voice matters, because just a few days ago, they were saying that there were going to be no amendments to this GOP plan. But all of a sudden now, because the voice of the American people has truly been heard, they're going to start to see it, and they're going to start to reform it in a way that really repeals and really replaces Obamacare, every single bit of it. Now, I would also say that when we are here today, when we were campaigning and we talked about repealing Obamacare, we didn't say we were going to keep part of it. We said we were going to repeal it all. Don't you think now is the time to do that? So I would encourage you to thank the president for keeping his promise, because in the end, we're going to repeal it. We're going to repeal it all. Now, I also want to say this. When the going gets rough, there are only a few people that are willing to stand and take it in the chin. And you know what? When you do, it may send you back home to North Carolina or Ohio or Virginia or wherever. But if we do the right thing, even if it sends us home, it is the right thing for the American people. It is the right thing for our country. And now is the time to stand up. We'll be judged on one thing, and it is not a CBO score. It is really not on even keeping our word, even though we will be judged on that. It'll be if premiums don't come down, then we will have failed, and that's the only number that matters when you open up your insurance bill. If it's lower 10 years from now, substantially lower, then we will have succeeded. But I'm going to introduce a dear friend of mine, a guy that's a two-time national champion wrestler who knows what it's like to get on the mat and really fight it out. A man who's not afraid to say it how it is, one of my best friends in Congress, the gentleman from Ohio, the previous chair of the Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know the left is the left's having some of these protests around the country. You follow this? But the protests that matter the most are the ones you were all involved with in 2010, 2014, and 2016, where you spoke loudly and clearly, time to get rid of this law. So I just came here to say thank you. Thank you for your attitude. Thank Adam and the entire team for all the good work you've been doing for 6 years now. 6 years we've been fighting this. The time is now to get it done. And you've had the attitude. I always call it the David attitude. You all know the story. Israelites are camped against the Philistines. Every day the Philistine giant walked out and issued the challenge, who will fight Goliath? The Israelites' response was, he's so big we can never defeat him. But David's response was, he's so big I can't miss. That has been your attitude. That has been the attitude that has characterized our country for 200 plus years. A focus on freedom, a focus on liberty, and now is the time to get it done. I just thought of one other story. How many remember the, how many of you ever seen the musical 1776? You ever seen that show? Great show, and we love one of the shows we love. And it's, they're in Independence Hall when the founders decided they were going to declare to the world why it was appropriate to do what they were getting ready to do. List the reasons and the grievances why it was appropriate to have a revolution. And Adams is the driving force behind it. The scene that I always remember is Jefferson has written the Declaration. They're now doing what Congresses are supposed to do. They're marking it up, they're amending it, they're changing it, they're going through the markup. And Adams wants to get on with it. He's kind of impatient. They're marking it up. One member stands up and says, we need to change this section, because when King George sees this, it might be a little offensive to him. And Adams kind of rolls his eyes. Pretty soon another member stands up and says, yeah, in this particular section, we need to change it as well. This one sentence could be a little strong for Parliament, so we need to amend this. Adams rolls his eyes again. Finally, there's a third member who stands up and he says, yeah, now this paragraph has to go all together because this could jeopardize our deep-sea fishing rights off the coast of Carolina. And finally, Adams can't take it anymore, and he says, it's a revolution, dang it. We're going to have to offend somebody. That has been your attitude. Our job is not to offend. Our job is to stand for the truth, and we make our job as Congress sometimes way too complicated. Our job is real simple. Real simple. Do what we told the voters we were going to do. Do what you sent us to do. Now is the time to get that done. Thank you, and God bless you.
Representative Jim Jordan. So we got the ETA on Ted Cruz being approximately 5 minutes. And they said, can you fill some time? I said, I speak for 3 hours every day. This is clearly not a problem. By the way, one of the things we're leaving out of this, somebody just asked me off the side of the stage, what's that green line flag you're wearing on your head? And I said, it's the thin green line. It's the Border Patrol. We have not mentioned amnesty and open borders and immigration reform as it relates to health care. I pointed out to you before I brought up Mark Meadows that the CBO in its scoring showed that the subsidies would cost $1.47 trillion. When the CBO scored Senate Bill 744, that was the amnesty bill, they made the assumption that a bigger workforce automatically meant higher tax revenues. And then the assumption in Washington became, well, if we're going to spend it's going to cost us 1.4 trillion, 5 trillion, we got to get more people working. Except, how could the CBO know what the workforce of 10 years from now is going to look like, or 20 years from now is going to look like? If the CBO was scoring a bill related to whether or not the government should give everybody a telephone in their home, could they even know what telephones would look like 20 years later? They would have no idea there would be this thing called the iPhone or the Samsung Galaxy or whatever it is. If this bill isn't stopped, if the government continues to run health care, which, by the way, is, of course, mentioned in the Constitution, right? It's in there in the good and plenty clause, I think. What is health care going to look like if the other factions get their way and there's amnesty? That assumption that every single person that comes here from wherever they come from in a non-merit-based system, oh, we have to take a break? As far as radio world goes, we're taking a break. We're broadcasting live. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Good? Good. We want to make sure we get that breakout so Ted Cruz's whole speech gets on the air. What will the health care system look like after amnesty? Now, Donald Trump says no amnesty, and there's going to be a wall. I don't know how long till Paul Ryan gets his hands on that one. Because if you remember, 11 years ago under President Bush, the Republicans passed a law that Bush signed that was supposed to build a wall 11 years ago. Is there a wall? Okay, so funny thing happened on the way to the Senate, right? Before we bring up Ted Cruz, oh boy. Thank God we're in break right now because all you'd be hearing is wind in this microphone. Throughout the campaign, I referred to Rand Paul and Ted Cruz as intellectual constitutional conservatives because they are. It's not mean-spirited, narrow-minded, angry. None of you are angry, right? You're passionate, right? You're not angry. To say, hey, the word health care doesn't appear in the Constitution. The word education doesn't appear in the Constitution. We're not asking for anything extreme when we say, give us a constitutional government. Now, the funny thing is, and if I could get inside Donald Trump's head, I would say that Paul Ryan is trying to pass a bill that's going to be called TrumpCare. And if Paul Ryan's bill fails, they're going to blame you. Notice the Medicaid expansion sunsets in 2020, not when so many Republicans will be running for re-election, but when the president's running for re-election. If we were to go back to the 10th Amendment, if Donald Trump said, I don't want to own this thing, you states are going to run this. You're going to own this. You governors are going to handle this. You state assemblymen are going to handle this. You state senators. All right, we're coming back live on the air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're live, broadcasting live from Upper Senate Park for FreedomWorks' Day of Action. And we have been storming Congress. And in front of me right now, you can't see this on the radio, obviously, is an ocean of people in red baseball caps that say, storm Congress. But back to what I was saying during the break. The states could easily run their own health care systems, and the president wouldn't own anything. Meaning, they couldn't saddle his name, his legacy, his reelection with a bill they designed that's going to work just like Obamacare. Whoa, hold on, Andrew. We got some really big differences here. The penalties are going to be collected by the insurance company. Excuse me. The 30% penalty is going to be collected by the insurance company. Wow, thank you.
Do you see him?
You wanna? Dave Bratt? I don't want to start a speech to have to cut off a speech. We're waiting for Ted Cruz. What's the ETA now?
He's going to be like 30 seconds.
He's going to be 30 seconds? You know it's cold out here, right? I'm working it. I'm filling. Oh, wait. You mean the states are going to expand their Medicaid? You mean the government's still going to play Mother May I? How is that any different than Obamacare? If you could look me right in the face. And I love when they say, well, it's a conservative bill, Andrew. It's a conservative bill. It's a conservative bill. I'm sorry, I looked under its skirt. It's not a conservative bill. How on earth? And what's the old saying? If it walks like a, and it quacks like a, it's a, no. I guess in a crazy world, when you have a bill created by Republicans that works exactly like a bill created by Democrats, you say, that's a Democrat bill. You could tell me that it self-identifies as a Republican bill. But you know what? I saw its parts, and I don't want to go on a date with it. I don't want to live with it. I don't want to marry it. I don't even want to look at it. The amazing thing is that they keep telling us this is conservative, yet it still puts health care in the hands of the Now, one more point. Does anyone believe that if the Democrats take the House or the Senate in 2018, that they aren't going to obliterate whatever little differences there is between the ACA and the AHA? If Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi get their way, that 2020 Medicaid expansion will go to 20 whenever. Those penalties will go from 30% to 60%. And you know what they'll say? We got to have single payer. If you think we aren't on the way to single payer, if this bill passes, you are out of your mind. All right. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I did an event with a whole bunch of people, Rick Santorum, Carly Fiorina, all gave great speeches. But I never saw the kind of crowd reaction, the thunder, and the passion that I saw when we brought up the next speaker who's making his way here. When I said the name Senator Ted Cruz, it sounded a lot like that. So without further ado, Senator Ted Cruz.
God bless each and every one of you. Now, let me say, we have provided for our friends in the media definitive proof that the election of conservatives across the federal government has ended global warming. Of course, that's liable to make the media even more ornery, because if there'd been a Democrat, we would have apparently had global warming and they would have been in shorts enjoying the hot weather. I want to say to you guys, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for braving the cold. And thank you for standing up and fighting for freedom. Every one of you, this victory is your victory. In November, Democrats were shocked. The media was shocked, although I repeat myself. And millions of hardworking men and women across this country rose up and said, enough is enough, and we have a mandate for change. And I stand here today incredibly optimistic and energized. We have the opportunity to do an enormous amount of good. Now, we could screw it up. We could very easily screw it up. But I believe we're poised for this to be the most productive Congress in decades. And there are four big things on the agenda for 2017. The first and the most important is we must honor our promise and repeal Obamacare. For 6 years, Republicans have campaigned over and over and over again saying, if only you give us the House, we'll repeal Obamacare. If only you give us the Senate, we'll repeal Obamacare. If only you give us the White House, we'll repeal Obamacare. Well, you know what? We're out of excuses. The time for talk is over. Now is the time for action. And I got to tell you, I think failure is not an option. If Republicans take this opportunity and blow it, we will rightly be considered a laughingstock. So we can't do that. And I'll tell you, the leaders who've been here, the leaders who've been addressing you today, have been on the front lines fighting to take the House plan, which has a lot of problems, and to try to make it real repeal that lowers premiums, that gives you control over your health care. I believe we can get it done. I can tell you in the last week, 4 days, I've been at the White House meeting with the president, with the vice president, with the administration, with House members, with senators, saying we have got to get it done. And with your support, y'all are here to talk to your elected representatives. The most important message for all of us to hear from you is we've got to deliver on our promises. We need real repeal. And the test for success is going to be premiums. You look at why people are frustrated with Obamacare. There are a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is that premiums have skyrocketed and people can't afford their health care. Barack Obama promised the average family's premiums would drop $2,500 a year. In fact, the average family's premiums have risen $5,000 a year. That's what I hear over and over again from Texans. We can't afford quality health care for our kids, for our family. The test for a Republican repeal of Obamacare is, do we drive down premiums? Do we make health care more affordable for the American people? We can do that, but only if we repeal the Obamacare insurance mandates. The mandates are what are driving premiums through the roof. We've got to repeal them, and we've got to repeal them now. A second critical element before us in 2017 is regulatory reform. Just about every single cabinet member I've met with, among the very first words out of their mouth have been reg reform. I believe this administration's commitment on reg reform is real, it is genuine, and if there's one thing that we can all agree on about this president, he wants to be bold. And I will tell you, of all of the issues, I'm perhaps most optimistic about reg reform. I think we're going to see, we've already seen the beginnings of it, and I think over the rest of the year, we're going to see job-killing regulations that are hammering small businesses repealed and taken off the books. A third critical issue is tax reform. I believe we will pass fundamental tax reform either this summer or this fall. Now, the details of that are still up in the air, but I'll tell you what I'm urging the president. I'm urging two words: bold and simple. There is power in bold simplicity. Ideally, I'd like to see a simple flat tax and abolish the IRS. Now, some people in Washington say, gosh, that's a little extreme. They say, you know, shouldn't we just maybe decrease the top marginal rate to 37.95%? Well, let me ask you something. Is that any more radical or extreme or any more surprising to Washington than electing Donald Trump as president? The voters have given us a bold mandate for change. We have a Republican in the White House. We have Republicans in every agency of government. We have Republican majorities in both houses of Congress. How about we act like it? And the fourth major issue we're going to tackle is we are going to confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. The confirmation hearings start next week. I fully expect to see Democrats lighting their hair on fire. They may actually literally light their hair on fire. I expect them to scream and yell and do everything they can to impugn the good judge's integrity. But I expect next week also the American people are going to see a judge, a principled constitutionalist, who will follow the law, who will uphold the Bill of Rights, who will uphold free speech, who will uphold religious liberty, who will uphold the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, who will keep his oath to the Constitution and to defend the people of the United States of America. And you know what? If we do all of that, if we repeal Obamacare, if we see fundamental reg reform, if we see fundamental tax reform, and we confirm a strong conservative to the Supreme Court, 2017 will be a blockbuster year. So every one of you can turn to your neighbor and say thank you. Because it is each of you that got us here to where we are today, that put us in a position to recapture the country. And it is each of you that is holding us accountable to keep our promise, to defend liberty, to defend the Constitution, and to defend the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.
Let's get a picture. Senator Ted Cruz. Right out into the crowd.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Hey, is Eric Cantor speaking today? All right, he got voted out. You know, they say that you can't primary these guys out.
We love you.
You know, they're the only people that can run government. Whoa. It happens. It's live radio. I love the fact that Ted Cruz is literally walking through the crowd right now, shaking hands. That's why you love him. Whenever there's a primary challenge, the establishment always laughs, right? It'll never happen. You'll never vote them out. Who are these nobodies that think they're going to come in here and challenge us? I got 2 words for you. Dave Bratt. I don't think I need any more of an introduction than that, do I? Representative Dave Bratt.
All right. How we doing? It figures I got to follow Senator Ted Cruz. He's out there brown-nosing after he gives a stem winder. Thanks for doing all you do. I thought he was in the hockey warming hut grabbing a hot cocoa before he came out here. I went to high school in Minnesota, so this is like a spring day, right? This is nothing. We're all tough. We got it made. It's an honor to be here. Senator Mike Lee's right down here getting ready to clean up. And so I'm here with all the heroes of the freedom movement. I want to, he just said everything I was going to say. So I'm gonna go back to basics just a little bit. And by the way, hey, Major, who's here from Virginia? Woo! All right. Who's here from the 7th District of Virginia? All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out. That's my district. In my view, 3 things made this country great. First and foremost, the Judeo-Christian tradition, without which you don't get anything else. Out of that comes the rule of law. You got Moses. Paul Ryan looks out at Moses first thing every time. And then finally, at the end, if you really get lucky, I wore my Adam Smith tie. What do you get at the end of the tradition? Free markets and freedom and all the guys that made us great, most of which come from Virginia, by the way. I'm going to brag a little bit. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, etc. So what are we really here fighting for today? We're fighting for our freedom. Right now, who's in charge of your health care? You or the federal government? That's the issue. That's what we're fighting for. And so when you go back and talk common sense to the average person back home, when you say you're going to repeal Obamacare, does that mean the federal government's still in charge of your health care? Right. That's what we're fighting for, right? So Ted Cruz was just up here, and Rand Paul's been on every TV show the last 2 weeks. You turn on the TV, there's all the senators fighting for us. And Senator Ted Cruz is breaking the China into China shop, right? The rest of the Senate is telling us, hey, we have this parliamentarian, and they make the rules, and we can't put what we want over to the Senate. What do we got to say about that? Who do we want in the chair on that day? Vice President Pence? Let's put him in the chair. And now here's what we got to do. What's driving the prices? Obamacare, the prices are going up by 25% right now, right? Under the new bill, underneath the House bill, they say, the CBO says, prices are going to go down by 10%. Now let me see if we got some math majors out here. Prices are going up by 25%. If we reduce it by 10, how much are prices still going up? 15. Is that good enough for you, or you think we got to keep going? All right. That price reduction came from getting rid of insurance regulations. One of them, the bronze, platinum, silver thing. Got rid of one, you save 10%. You think we ought to get rid of a few more? That's it. All right, so that is called bucket 2. That's what leadership is promising comes next. So first we make government bigger, and then we promise you free markets later. Do you think we ought to do socialism first and then try to work in free markets? Or do you think we ought to start with free markets and then take care of those truly in need, which this country always does? All right, I'm with you. They told me 4 minutes. I'm probably already over. But it's an honor to be with you guys. That's the main thing we got to do, right, is keep it straight, keep it simple. You got to get the federal government out of health care. That's the issue, right? So keep it straight. How many of you are writing letters in the newspapers? How many of you are lying right now? All right, go. We need you. You are the voice of America, your freedom. And, hey, by the way, has anybody here thanked Adam, Brandon, lately? Adam and FreedomWorks puts this all together. These are the heroes behind the scenes that make freedom happen. Keep lighting it up, spread the good word, and God bless you all. Thank you for letting me say hey. God bless.
Representative Dave Bratt. Yeah, take that mic back. You know, it's amazing having FreedomWorks invite Jenny Beth Martin and the Tea Party Patriots. There's another organization here in Washington, D.C. that's been doing this for a long time. And it's one of the few organizations that loves talk radio so much, they have a studio inside their offices. I'm talking about the Heritage Foundation. Please welcome the Executive Vice President for Communications, Dan Holler.
How y'all doing? You're cold? Yeah? All right. I do need a hat. I'm going to be real quick. Mike Lee is coming up next, and he's going to be awesome. But I wanted to tell you something that Dave Bratt didn't tell you. Speaker Ryan was right about something. He didn't know he was right, but he was right. We have a binary choice. We can either get rid of Obamacare or basically keep it in place. The bill in the House basically keeps it in place. We reject that choice, right? It's really important, though. It's not just right now. We need to look at history, right? We can learn from history. Back in 2003, the chairman of the RSC, the Republican Study Committee, went to the House floor and stood up and said, you know what? Despite the best efforts of my leadership, I cannot vote for this bill. It's the largest entitlement expansion in 65 years, and I will not do it. That guy, that was Mike Pence. He's the Vice President of the United States now. Mike Pence was a beacon of hope for all the conservatives in 2003 when Republicans were expanding the entitlement state. We need new leaders in Washington right now to stand up. We saw Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Dave Bratt, Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, who's going to be up here, Ted Cruz. They are leading this fight, and our congressional leaders need to follow them so we can actually repeal Obamacare. We can do it. They need to hear your voice to make it happen, because it's not just what happens up here, it's what you all want, and they need to hear that. So thank you for being up here, and remember, we can do this. We can actually repeal Obamacare.
All right, once again, we are broadcasting live on SiriusXM satellite radio, the Patriot channel, channel 125. I was actually going back over to the broadcast position to do the top of the hour, but I figured I would just do it from this mic. When I use the phrase intellectual constitutional conservative, I apply that to very few people. There are very few people that I call intellectual constitutional conservative because it's tough. It means understanding how the government works. It means sometimes believing in something, but saying loudly, hey, this is not for the government. There are very few people that could separate their opinions from what it is they believe about government. Whether we're talking about same-sex marriage or abortion or wealth redistribution or whatever it is, it's very tough for people to separate their opinions from their knowledge of the Constitution. I'm almost geeking out now with our next guest because Senator Mike Lee is one of those people that when it comes to adherence to the Constitution, I can think of few who are more intellectual, more passionate, and more understanding about how this government is supposed to work. Please give it up for Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you, Andrew Wilco. I'm a big fan of his show. If you don't listen to his show, you should. My name is Mike Lee. I come from a state called Utah. And it's snowing. We don't technically call this snow in Utah, but we'll let it pass for that. You know, I ran for the United States Senate a few years ago. I was elected in 2010. And I decided to run for the Senate because I've come to believe that the federal government has become too big and too expensive. Anybody agree with that? And it has become that way specifically because it forgot about the reason why it was created in the first place. It forgot about the rules that are designed to keep you, we, the people, in charge of our own government rather than the other way around. Our founding fathers understood from sad experience that bad things happen when you let too few people exercise all the power. It's bad, isn't it? I mean, look, human beings are flawed. They make mistakes. They're redeemable, but they're flawed. And they tend to abuse power when they get too much of it. That's why we came up with this brilliant compromise that is the U.S. Constitution. I happen to have a copy of it right here. Yeah, right there. By the way, the only reason I know anything about it is because I read it. I encourage you to do the same. These words are still simple. They're still easy to understand. They're still words that we need to read all the time. Now, I read it a lot, and yet I keep it with me all the time just so I can refer to it when I need to. Every once in a while, you might get it messed up, so I'd encourage you to read it. I also wrote a book about it called Our Lost Constitution. That helps too, but this is the most important part. That Constitution divides power in two ways. Divides power first along the vertical axis by saying most of the power is supposed to stay close to the people at the state and local level, with you, right? And then it says within Washington, we've got three branches, one that makes the law, one that enforces the law, one that interprets the law. Well, you know what we've seen over the last 80 years? Under the leadership of both political parties, we've seen both of those protections ignored. We've seen both of them weakened. We've seen power taken away from you, the people, in two steps. First, the power is taken from the people, from the 50 states, and moved to Washington. Then within Washington, it's been transferred to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. Has this been good for you? Has this been good for government bureaucrats? Has it been good for a small number of entrenched elites? Do we need to turn that around and return to the Constitution? Yes, we do. Yes, we can. And yes, we will. Now, you want to know something interesting that's happened? As we've taken power away from the people in these two steps, from the people to Washington, within Washington, over to the executive branch bureaucrats, very few people have gotten really rich and really powerful off of this arrangement. You want to know something interesting? 6 of our nation's 10 wealthiest counties are now suburbs of Washington, D.C. This is an area that manufactures nothing. This is an area that is not a banking hub. It's not a home to any vast store of natural resources. It's not a technological innovation hub. No, the power is here and the money is here, and the only reason the money is here is because the power is here. The power needs to be turned back to you, the American people. Which brings us to why we're here today. 7 years ago next week, Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. I know. It's got this Orwellian name because, of course, what it does is exactly the opposite. Has it made your health insurance more affordable? We've seen healthcare prices skyrocket. Now, it's been really good for a handful of insurance companies, hasn't it? It's been really good for a handful of bureaucrats, hasn't it? But it's hurt everyone else. So that's why the story of Obamacare is consistent with the story of the rest of the Constitution. We've got to return power back to the people. You know something interesting? Franklin D. Roosevelt used to refer to the forgotten man. He wanted to be the friend of the forgotten man. He borrowed that term from somebody else, Graham Sumner, who wrote about it in the late 1800s. The forgotten man was actually somebody like you and me. The forgotten man and the forgotten woman is the hard-working taxpayer who just wants to put bread on the table for his family, who isn't there, who isn't necessarily the target of any government program. He just wants to be free. He wants to prosper. And he does best when the government allows him to do what he does best, which is work hard to provide for his own family. It's the forgotten man that has suffered most under this program. It's the forgotten man that's been punished even as corporate and government elites in Washington have been made richer and more powerful by more growth of government. And it's time for us to turn that around. Starting a couple of years ago, after we got the majority, Republicans got the majority in the Senate. We already had the majority in the House of Representatives, in part because of Obamacare. We started talking about passing an Obamacare repeal bill. We were told by a few people in the House of Representatives that all we could pass was a watered-down version of Obamacare, one that didn't get rid of a lot of the programs. They were not right. We ended up passing something much more aggressive than that, and that can be the case here too. It's time for us to make a decision. Are we going to repeal Obamacare? Are you going to encourage each of your senators and your representative to do the same? Will you stand with me in putting the American people and their doctors back in charge of their own health care decisions? We can do this, folks. Together we can, we must, and we will. Thank you very much.
Senator Mike Lee. All right, so here we are. You guys have been out in the cold. I've been out in the cold. This is the part now where you guys go and again storm Congress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the broadcast position, and I'm going to bring up the director of events for FreedomWorks, who's going to wrap this up, and then in you guys go. Give it up for Noah Wall.
Hello, team. Now we have to go storm Congress. I need you guys to split into your teams that you came with. Most of you guys came by buses. I need you guys to raise up the team leaders to raise up your placards. I need you guys to join up with your teams and go and talk to your members of Congress and tell them why we need to repeal Obamacare. Tell them why they need to keep their promises. We have to make this happen. So join with your team. Let's make this happen. Thank you, and I'm going to pass it back to our good friends at Will Count Majority. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, one last thing. Text full repeal to 388873. 388873, full repeal. I'll make sure FreedomWorks gets all your contact information so we know who is here today. Thank you.
All right, guys, let's get it done. If you weren't a member of a group, join me right around here, and we will get you guys taken care of, set up, and going to talk to your members of Congress. Thank you guys again.
What reminded me, have you ever seen the penguins in Antarctica?
Yeah.
They kind of huddle together.
Yeah, come close, will you?
Who spoke before I got here? They told me. A bunch of no, yeah, it started at one. Started at one? Yeah. Cool. Yeah.